Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning. Parents, what if we could give you the power to transform your family into something absolutely amazing?
A family where everyone is healthy, gets along, loves Jesus, and has great purpose in life.
Hey, let us flip your thinking to unlock the power God has given you to create your own Crazy Cool family. Intentionality. What does that look like in your marriage? What does that look like in your family? How does it help you? What are the benefits of intentionality, particularly in your marriage? How can it help you? How does it hurt you when you're not intentional? We are going to talk about that subject today with a wonderful couple, Jonathan and Carrie Vajko. Rhymes with Waco, even though they're not from Texas. They are from Green Bay, and they are a wonderful couple. They have a podcast called Couples Becoming Intentional, and they talk to younger married couples all the time about how to help them become more intentional in their marriage and therefore, as a consequence, more intentional in their family. So let's join us today as we talk to Carrie and Jonathan. We're going to love it. They're full of energy, full of life, and full of wisdom about becoming intentional in your marriage. Welcome, parents and others, to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast. Don here today because we have some very cool guests, Jonathan and Carrie Vajko. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Rhymes with
Yes,
Waco,
you got it.
not spelled like that. Really throws me. It's Vajko. They have a great podcast called Couples Becoming Intentional. So, Jonathan and Carrie, welcome to the podcast.
Well, welcome, guys. In true parenting fashion, my John is off gallivanting with our 5-year-old to make sure that he is settled for this. So we are excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, and I'm sure every parent can relate to just as soon as the podcast started.
Exactly.
And we have the interruption
Yes.
as soon as we get on the phone, just as soon as we, decide to watch that show, sit down and read that book, especially with young kids. Well, today in the podcast, and Jonathan and Carrie are delightful people. They live up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the podcast really we're going to talk about today is about being intentional in our marriage, and just what does that look like? What are the dangers of not doing it? And so really just first of all, though, just give our audience a little bit of your story.
Absolutely. So John and I met 8 years ago.
Has it really been that long?
It has been that long. It seems forever ago. We met 8 years ago serving on staff at a Bible camp in northern Wisconsin. And his sister was a good friend of mine. So I credit her to having us be together. And we got married a year after us, developing friends and being on staff. We got married a year later. And then a year and a half or so after that, we became parents for the first time. It was very unexpected. My doctor told me, okay, this is unexpected happiness. And that's how we choose to reframe our son, who's now 5 years old. And then we have a daughter who's 3 years old. So we are in the thick of parenting with really young kids. I work full time and John is a stay-at-home dad. And we just love this life that we get to live.
Very physically exhausting, but yes, it is.
Yes.
Very, very fun. We thought, why not get a dog as well during this myth? So we also have a puppy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's funny. Very, very physically exhausting, says the stay-at-home dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so you guys have the Couples Becoming Intentional podcast. You can find it anywhere on any podcast platform. But so how did you guys get into where that became your passion to help couples become intentional?
Yeah. So we've had this idea of we wanted to do a podcast like any true millennial, because if you're not, it's like a stamp of honor almost. And so for us, this kind of budded, I don't know, 2 years ago, we've had this idea of starting a podcast. We wanted to talk about stories. It started off as how did our story our story past of like who we were as kids, play a role into our current marriages, and then also just like get other people's like stories so that you can see how like how how you grew up kind of like shaped the person that you are now. And that kind of developed over time. And then a year later, after like started like having this idea, it kind of got to like, well, why don't we just talk about our marriage? Because we realized like trying to get guests on is going to be a really long process, really hard process. We're readily available on a weekly basis to sit down and record. So we're like, why don't we just talk about us? And you're like, okay, so what did like what sparked this kind of like intentionality is like, oh right, we want to become intentional. And so now we've been recording for just over a year, been releasing on a weekly basis, and it came out of just like we wanted. It started off as just us talking about ourselves, talking about like our journey, and then it kind of just like we got more people listening when we started dropping like, hey, this is what worked for us, hey, this is what didn't work for us, and hey, this is what works for others, but we tried it didn't quite work for us. And so when we started like doing that, that's kind of like developed our podcast into kind of being like helping other young couples grow more intentional with each other, so that they can not only have a healthy marriage, but also have a healthy like family, because we believe that like, yes, your first and foremost relationship should be with Jesus. Then it should be second with your spouse, and then third with your kids. And so we're trying to like give the tips and tricks and all this stuff of not only having a healthy relationship with Jesus, but also with your spouse, so that can be like trickled down into like your parenting.
Yes. And also with everything that John said is so true and so accurate about like our upbringing and all this. We both come from broken homes. Now we probably wouldn't have said that 5 years ago, but now watching our parents like live their lives, they're becoming further. Some of them are becoming further and further away from Jesus. And John and I do not want that for our families. We do not want that for our kids to look up to. So we're navigating like our own parent stuff that we're walking through. We're recognizing that we are generation stoppers, that we don't want that to continue. So we're going a different route and wanting to continue on that. So one of the ways that we have this podcast is really for us to remind us that we need to be intentional with each other, because it's not just about John and I, it's not just about our kids, but it's about all the generations that will come after it that are going to be shaped and molded into the image of Jesus because of what we chose to do. And that's not glory to us, that's glory to God.
Yeah. And
right.
Yeah. And so, question in the year of doing this podcast, of becoming intentional and getting out there and getting it all going, what have you learned about becoming intentional? For you guys have a 3 and a 5-year-old, so a lot of our parents are in that season. Some of them may be older kids as well. So, but I'm sure you're talking to older parents as well. What are you finding that? Maybe let's start with, before we get into the practical, what are the benefits of intentionality? What are the dangers of not being intentional?
Great. So one of the benefits that I see about being intentional, and that gets me really excited, is again that generational impact. Is that when it's modeled for our kids, what two parents who love the Lord, who love each other, when that's modeled for kids, it's teaching them what a healthy relationship looks like. And both John and I did not have healthy relationships with like the opposite sex growing up. It was more of like just different until we came into a relationship with each other. And we want to be able to model for them what a loving relationship with Jesus and what a loving relationship with each other looks like. So that way they can model it with their friends and maybe a future spouse one day, and just family members and any person on the street, because we want to be modeling the love of Jesus to people. That's one of the things that I see of like the blessing of being intentional, is like the generational impact. What about for you, John?
For me, I think it's intentionality is what can bring you from just surviving parenting to thriving in your parenting. and in your marriage. Like that's what we talk about. And so I think so many people just like tolerate the other person that's married, and then they eventually fall into that, just like we're roommates with
Right.
some blessings,
Yeah.
with benefits. That's what it
Yes.
is. Roommates with benefits, and that's not what we want to see for marriage. That's not what God wants to have us to like. He wants us to see our marriages thrive, and that takes intentionality. Like
Right.
sitting across from the other person and like actually knowing their heart, soul, mind, well-being, whatever. And so I think, yeah, it helps that that spark of just understanding who's the person you're married to.
Right.
So,
and you kind of alluded to this, John, of what the negative aspects of it too, of being roommates. And I think we can all like either think of people in our life or just know what different seasons of each other's lives are, of where you just feel like two ships passing in a night. I know John and I had this conversation just a couple of days ago. It's a really abundant week for me work wise and with the kids. And there's just been a lot of on the schedule this week. And so John had mentioned to me, like, we're feeling like two ships passing in the night. And I'm like, okay, for until this day, because now it was only for a 3-day span. We recognize it, and then we know that for the next couple of days we're going to take advantage of the time that we do have, rather than just continuing in the ships passing in the night, which I feel like if you're choosing to not be intentional, that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up being roommates. You're going to end up not really knowing who you got married to. You're going to end up just with disordered views of what marriage and relationships are supposed to be. And then you could end up being like ships passing in the night. And then you wake up 30 years down the road, 20 years down the road, and you're like, I don't know who I married. Well, it was all these little types of habits that you did that actually caused that. It wasn't that overnight you forgot who your spouse was. It was all the little habits that you did throughout the years that culminated to not having an intentional relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally just talking to someone in the last couple of days, and hopefully, the reason I'm talking to them is because I'm hoping they're having a breakthrough. Been married for 35 years, and one of the things and they're really, in some ways close to potentially a divorce situation. And one of the things that she said was, I don't feel heard. And so I think part of intentionality is helping your spouse to feel heard, listen to what you mentioned, Jonathan. Just the intimacy of it, of really knowing knowing your spouse, and knowing. I think so often in the day to day grind, if you will, the day to day busyness, we know what the spouse thinks about the schedule, or we know what the spouse thinks about maybe what's going on with the church or whatever. But I mean, what about what's going on inside them? How are they feeling? And many times our own worries and cares, it seems like, gets in the way of that. So yeah, and so that kind of gets to kind of the dangers of it, is what you said, is building kind of this roommate relationship where over time distance comes. And as you guys talk to a lot of married people, we tend to talk to a lot of people about marriage, but also more about parenting. About, oh my goodness, what do I do with this 7-year-old? But or a teenager or whatever. When you're dealing with people that have been married for 5 to 10 years, what are you finding that where are the issues in their relationship that come from not being intentional?
I think the biggest thing that we've kind of just been seeing is, like what you said, not being heard. It's this lack of communication. And a lot of what, even like for John and I, a lot of that comes with past hurt, past weight, or like the way that you were raised. A lot of it's personality and really understanding how God designed it, the person that you're married to. I know for me, the way that one of the things that I constantly work through is asking for help. And I know, or even just expressing my own needs or doing something for myself.
Meaning that you don't do that.
Correct. I don't normally do that.
You don't
So
ask for help. You don't ask for your needs to be met. You don't take time for yourself. Yeah. Okay.
correct. And to me, I thought that was godly. Like, we think of others before ourselves, but I took it to an extreme that became unhealthy. And I know that that brought up a lot of bitterness in the beginning of John and I's marriage, because I was wondering why he wasn't meeting needs that I hadn't told him about. Um, yeah, I know it's funny to laugh at now. But that was the truth. I wanted him to be able to read my mind, to anticipate my needs, because that's what I do for other people. I'm really easily to be able to anticipate needs, to
Recognize needs.
yes, recognize them, meet them in like the weirdest of ways, and just be there for people. And I was assuming that other people were wired the same way that I was. And so I was getting very, very upset when John wasn't doing that to me. Well, that's because God didn't wire John like that. We're actually complete opposites. And I think that's one of the things that when we're thinking about the whole idea of like not, or like what are the biggest hurdles of being intentional, I think that's it, is not recognizing the differences and having it be a blessing that your spouse brings to the table, and acknowledging it and being willing to work through it or compromise in different areas. So I know that John isn't always going to be super in tune or aware of all the needs that I have. That takes me actually voicing them. And that's something that I get to grow in. And for John, it takes him learning to recognize some of the different things and learning some of the different cues that I may give. And it's been something both of us have gotten to grow in. And I think that's something that it takes time, and a lot of people don't want to take the time. We're selfish people. We're fleshly, selfish people that we want our needs met right away. And when they're not, we're going to look to something else rather than actually having a dialogue conversation with your spouse, with a friend, with family members about what it can actually look like to have a more meaningful, loving relationship.
Yeah, I think one of the things you just said there is wanting your needs to be met without articulating them. And that's what intentionality does, is you start talking about things. You start saying, this is how I feel about that, or this is what I want, or this is what I want you to want, or whatever. Suzanne used to say, I love the idea too of recognizing the differences. Suzanne used to say that she spent the first 10 years of her marriage trying to turn me into a hairy woman, because she wanted me to be, she thought, and I thought too, if we could teach each other to be like each other, then that would be better, because our way was better. We knew better. But in reality, we're really expressing more. A lot of that intentionality is celebrating each other's differences and helping each other become the best they can be, not turning them into another version of, my family doesn't need two of me. It needs a husband and a wife, and both of us are super different.
Yeah, I would say for sure that it comes down to communication. I don't know. I'm just like processing, like, I think it comes down to like growing up. Yes, you're put into circumstances where you can talk about similar interests because that's what you have. Like, you're forced into. Like, if you're on a sports team, you talk about sport. If you're at school, you talk about school. But like, we never learn how to like actually carry a conversation. And so like one of our biggest thing is like trying to teach people how to ask open-ended questions so that you can really get down to the depth of like why people think about the things that they think about, or why they do the things that they do, because then like you can fully understand like who they are, because then you can understand like, okay, if Carrie's motivation is I want to help people, then obviously she's going to easily forget about herself. If my motivation is I want peace and serenity, I'm going to shelter myself off and say other people are difficult, and so then I'm going to put barriers up. And so if we know like what our motivations are, one for ourselves but also for our spouse, that we can know that like how we can best serve them essentially. And so yeah, it comes down to communication styles as well. Some people just rub you off the wrong way because like of their way they communicate towards you. And so,
have you heard about Basecamp? It's our free family-focused membership platform made just for you. After a short 3-minute sign up, you instantly receive access to our relationship and culture courses. This is a space where we teach you through short form video or audio about God's vision for family. We believe investing your time in these videos will drastically change the way you think about family. You can watch the videos on your own or with a group. We've designed what we call the trails to walk you through each course. So grab your phone and click the link in the show notes to sign up today. Or even better, grab a friend and sign up for the trails. Everything you need to know is in the show notes link. Join Basecamp today. Then join a trail and start rethinking the way you do family.
A lot of people listening to our podcast would say, we want our marriage to be great. We want intentionality in our marriage. We believe in that, even though we may not practice it as much as we believe it. So what would you tell these parents as far as practical ways to bring intentionality into the marriage relationship?
Such a great question. One of the things that just give encouragement to that, if you're asking the questions of how can I be more intentional? How can I go from a marriage that's surviving to thriving? That's awesome. Like, acknowledging that you want things to get better is great. So pat yourself on the back. This is awesome. Because there are so many couples who just negate it and say, this is my lot in life. This is what I've got. And I'm just going to keep living it. And that's not the way God designed marriages. And I'm giddy that question's being asked. Practical things for us, and this is something that we do on the podcast. I'm going to take one section and then John will take another section, is even in the midst of having a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, sometimes like date nights and date days can get like pushed off to the side because it takes so much more effort. I know for us, that means finding a babysitter, carving out time when we're probably really tired to be intentional with one another. But taking the time for just the two of you to remember that your husband-wife relationship is extremely important, that the legacy impact that's going to have, like reminding you of all these different things, is helpful when it comes to being consistent and intentional about carving out time on the calendar. Because you can look at your calendar and I can tell you what you're prioritizing in this season and what is most important to you. And if intentional time with your spouse is not on there, then you're showing me that that's actually not something that you're prioritizing. Or if you say, I don't have time, reframe it and say, that's not a priority to me right now. And when you reframe it like that, that kind of hurts a little bit because you're recognizing that it's actually not a priority for you and your spouse to get together. And that's not the ticket to an intentional marriage. So I know for us, we're really intentional about carving out at least a weekend for us to get on a plane and fly away to a different part of the country for just us time, just for us to reconnect. And then my mom is local to us and she's been so gracious to just recognize like, hey, it's been a little bit since I've had my grandkids. I'm going to have them over for an overnight and then just allow us to have a staycation, not needing to spend a ton of money and still being able to be intentional with other people. Cause I know that's a big thing that we get asked a lot of, but I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a way to make this happen. Babysitters plus date, like going out on a date, like that's so expensive. Most of the time for us, it's like grabbing a bottle of wine and some cheese and crackers. And once the kids are in bed, watching a new movie we haven't seen, or being able to have swaps with other parents. So we have a family that we're really close with that we'll take their 4 kids plus our 2 kids and the parents go out on a date and then we'll swap. So they'll take all 6 of the kids and then we'll go out on a date. And just being able to have like the 2 hours of carved out intentional time to go back to then your family is like a next step that you could take. And then John, do you want to talk about the questions that we do?
I will say to your point first, be unique with like your date nights, right? Mm-hmm. Like you don't need to do dinner and a thing.
Yeah.
You can go grocery shopping together. Mm-hmm. And that is a date.
Do that.
It never works out because I buy more things that we don't actually need on our grocery list.
It's so true.
Yeah, we found that doesn't work for us. So it's okay to be unique with your dates and find things that work for you. Find something that's free if you're tight on a budget. Find something that you both enjoy. Find something new that you both haven't tried before, because then it like you're trying something new together so that you can see if it's something you actually enjoy. Like mini golf for us, pool. Pool is one of these things that we both realized in our marriage that like we both enjoy, but we never like pursued it as a hobby before.
Right.
So then for what was it? Questions? Yeah, just again, reiterate what I said earlier is just that like open-ended questions, the who, the what, the when, the where. Try to refrain from using why questions, because when you use why questions, that's you're questioning their motives, and people will be defensive when you question their motives. So when you ask those open-ended questions, you get to a level of understanding that you wouldn't have known before. And with that, when you're asking open-ended question, you are also heart-centered listening. So that is another big thing that we teach is that like, yes, you can ask a question, but if you're not listening intently, hearing what the words that they're actually saying, because the words that people say have significance behind it. And so like understand what words they're using and what, if they're using a word constantly, then it must be a significant to them. And then also understand what they mean by a certain word. And so it's funny, like when I like to tell a quick story, we had a life group this past year, and the leader of that life group he was an engineer, and so it was he was talking, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna actually like hear what he's saying. He said solution 5 times within 5 minutes, and I'm like, Dan, are you a solution oriented person? He's like, yeah, I am. He's like, that's very acute of you. I'm like, do you think uh your wife wants you to always be solution oriented? And he's like, oh, no, that's what I usually go to, is a solution oriented mind frame. And so, yeah, those open ended questions can really get people to reveal like, oh, that's why the things I do. And so
That's good. That's good. So even in your podcast, you have certain questions. Every once in a while, you'll have 8 crazy questions to ask on your next date night, or 15 questions to ask your spouse. Things like that. So um, let's kind of roll on that just a little bit, because questions are super powerful. And what how do you were talking about just the open-ended question for one. um, uh, I find that some spouses really like to talk about themselves, other spouses don't. um, if you're one of those spouses that, and so often, like my wife, I'm the one that likes to talk about myself. She's the one it's hard to get to talk about with her. And so, spend a lot of time trying to, or you also have we were just talking about this post before we got on, that one of you is an external processor, or really, likes to talk quickly. Another one is more of a thinker, more of a processor, a longer term processor. So, how do you talk to couples in your questions and things like that? When you have all these differences, and what kind of advice would you give couples in navigating the differences in personalities, gender, all the things that make it difficult to have conversations sometimes?
do you want to share what you had to learn in the last 7 years when it came to
It's so true. I'm glad we were on the same wavelength, because that's exactly what I was going to share. You can see that I'm usually talking first after a question to allow John to process the question, because I'm an external processor. One of the best pieces of advice I got, because I'm external, John's a more internal processor. We were actually at a wedding, and they were going around with a video camera in front of everybody's face and asking them, "What is your best piece of marriage advice?" We had been married for maybe a year at this point, so I was like, we got nothing to share. The couple next to us, they had been married for 20 years, and same kind of dynamic. She's an external processor and he is more of an internal processor. And she said, because she recognized that the couple that just got married was similar in that aspect, and she said, when you ask a question of, so like when Carrie, would ask a question of John, wait 5 minutes for a response.
5 minutes.
I'm like, that's a long time. And they said, wait 5 minutes. And I'm like, no, I want an answer in 30 seconds or else I've already moved on. So there are multiple times when, if there's like a more serious conversation that I want us to have, or I ask a more thought provoking question, if I ask it, a lot of this time, this happens on road trips, I ask the question and then I have to wait, because if I speak and I say something like, are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about that? Are you done thinking about it? Do I have an answer yet? If I have that, it interrupts his thought pattern and he can't process. So then he has to go back through the whole process. And
it's like reset timer.
Yes, I have a timer on my watch where I'm looking at the clock on the dashboard of the car and I wait 5 minutes. And most of the time it's quick, like he'll come to a response after 5 minutes, but it's practice for me to listen and not be anticipating an answer or having a quick conversation. Silence is more challenging for me. So just to sit in silence and be patient and wait for an answer is actually a self-control thing for me that I've been learning and growing in. And so that's one of the ways that I work with my internal processing husband. What about you, John?
I didn't have to learn anything at all. I think for because Carrie is more of the A type, the external processor. She kind of lives a pace of life that's a lot faster than I live. I'm more of the B type, kind of laid back kind of guy, and so not automatically. I had to learn this for not just shutting down when she bombards me with questions or like wants to have a conversation, because I feel like if she like is coming at me with like this pace that's like I'm going at this speed and you're going 10 times as fast.
Yes.
I like it can get me overwhelmed. And so like learning those like, oh, like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't need to shut down. I can take a deep breath and say, okay, like ask the question of, okay, what do you want me to answer first? What do you want me to like, what part of John do you actually want? Like, do you want me to be solution oriented? Do you want me to be just to sit here and listen to you? Because I can do both. I can solve your problems, or I could just listen to you and vent, let you vent. And that's one of those things that, like,
so really
not automatically.
Yeah. And as we kind of wrap up here, I think, one of the things that I come out of it by listening to you guys is being intentional doesn't have to be hard. That it's
Correct.
I mean, it may take some effort and energy, but I mean, literally we can probably boil it down to everything I've listened to you guys, if I had to just summarize. And one time in one of my church elder meetings, they said, Don, you have the spiritual gift of summary. And which really isn't a spiritual gift, but I mean, but it's just funny that because I always want to bring things to a conclusion. But it's really just making time and asking questions. If couples would do those two things, make time weekly, monthly, annually. My wife and I, Suzanne, we used to go out. Every time on our anniversary, we would go to a bed and breakfast for an evening or two. And so just to live. We usually were carrying a baby with us because we always had a baby, it seemed like. But it just seems like that you can say, man, if we just make time and ask questions of each other and listen, that would be a long way towards becoming intentional. Would you guys agree with that? Did I summarize well?
That would be a huge step towards intentionality, right? It's simple. Yes, it's simple to say, just like make time, listen, ask those questions, and it's not always easy because you have to meet the other person at where they're at, and that's hard sometimes.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. Any final thoughts you have? The Holy Spirit just wanting to come out of you to tell our audience anything before we wrap up?
I just want to say, if you're in the boat of you're wanting to take the next step to be intentional, just know that it's worth it. That any relationship that you have takes effort, it takes time, and to be patient with the process. I mean, even if you look at your relationship with Jesus, it took time to get to where you were today. And the same with any relationship that you have. So keep doing that next little thing, that one tiny habit that you could implement to be intentional with your spouse is great. Start on the next one thing that you could do to then have it be built into a habit that you have an incredible marriage and a lasting legacy.
I will also say this, wrapping up, if like you're like, oh my goodness, yes, this is what I've been missing, don't just leave it there. Like knowing something is not enough to actually motivate you into doing something. Find another couple, find a small group within your church and say, like, we are going to be intentionality warriors or whatever, and say, like, we want to motivate each other so that we can be more intentional. We are communal beings. Meaning we need to be in community to do anything. Like that's so find 1, 2, 3 couples that you can just really rely on and really just pour into them, but then also them pour into you.
Yeah. Jonathan and Carrie Vajko. I got that name. I got that last name right.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for being with us. Anything in terms of connecting with you guys, listening to your podcast, anything else you wanted to connect with, anything you want to tell them about that?
Yeah, feel free to listen to our podcast, Couples Becoming Intentional, wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes come out every Thursday, and you can find all the information over there and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yep, we were on that podcast. We did one of those. We did one of those podcasts.
Exactly.
And hey, you guys are awesome. If you're ever in Green Bay, you can look them up, guys. Yeah, wherever you are around. So, hey, thanks for being here, and thanks for just reaching out to married couples and helping them become intentional. Man, it really is. It's not easy. It's just like anything with Jesus. It's not easy, but it is simple. The more, and so I like simple things because I feel like I can do them. So, so let's be intentional. And as always, parents of Crazy Cool Family, go be crazy. crazycoolfamily.com.